Hey, welcome back to another episode of Road Noise. Dad and I were just catching up on life and just kind of reminiscing about just getting older. And it's a privilege to be able to do that together. And Dad was just commenting that we started this journey a couple years ago now, I guess, Dad,
Hmm.
because there was this hurdle of having so many road noise stories that you've just been collecting over the years, just a mountain of them. And I think at the time you were crouching in at close to 500. And here we're well over that. And you were commenting just a minute ago that the story tonight is one that you just finished up in the last few days. So
Yeah.
I love that 50 plus years into this, you're still capturing stories and just, reflecting on those life lessons. So I'm looking forward to where we're going tonight.
Well, we're going to back up in time. Even though this story was just written basically this week, I was reminded of it last week. And so it hit me, and I said, okay, I got to write this because I think it's pretty cool. So let me take us back to it must have been somewhere around 1976. We were living in Alaska, and I put together a program that we affectionately called our Worry program. And I wished I knew how many times and how many places that we did that show. Now, keep in mind, when I wrote that in 1976 or so, that we had just fairly recently moved to Alaska, found out that the job that I thought I had wasn't a paying job, but a volunteer position. Keep in mind that we had just had our first baby and that we were living in a wooden tent without a furnace, without running water, without a bathroom, a septic, no modern amenities. So, in other words, we weren't doing all that well. Our lifestyle, as far as economics and so forth, were concerned. But that's the time that we put the Worry program together. I remember doing that. I was sitting at my desk. Now, my desk was a piece of half-inch plywood that straddled a pile of boxes. Okay, so that was my desk, and I was in the upstairs, in the upper room of our wooden tent, where our bedroom was at. And sitting there at my desk, I was reading my Bible, and I came across Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. If you're familiar with that, that's the story or the Sermon on the Mount. And when I got to chapter 6, verses 25 to 33, they hit me big time. Let me read those verses to you. I tell you not to worry about your life. Don't worry about having something to eat, drink, or wear. Isn't your life more than food and clothing? Look at the birds in the sky. They don't plant or harvest. They don't even store up grain in barns. Yet your Father in heaven takes care of them. Aren't you worth much more than birds? Can worry make you live any longer? Why worry about clothes? Look how the wildflowers grow. They don't work hard to make their clothes. But I tell you that Solomon in all of his wealth wasn't as well clothed as one of them. God gives such beauty to everything that grows in the fields, even though it is here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow. God will supply, do everything, or God will surely do even more for you. Why do you have such little faith? Then verse 31, don't worry and ask yourselves, will we have anything to eat? Will we have anything to drink? Will we have any clothes to wear? Only people who don't know God are always worrying about such things. Your Father knows that you need these, but more than anything else, put God's work first and do what He wants. Then all the other things will be yours as well. Well, when I read those verses, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Even though I had read and heard those verses many times, all of a sudden I felt like they were written just for me. And within just a few minutes after that, I had put together the outline for a brand new puppet program, and that was to be the Worry program. And while I was still sitting there, putting this outline together, my mind went back to the Old Testament and the story of Elijah in 1 Kings, chapter 17. Let me read just a couple verses from that. It says, "And the word of the Lord came to him," Elijah, "Depart from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the brook Corinth, which is east of the Jordan. You shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there." So he went and did according to the word of the Lord. He went and lived by the brook Corinth, that was set east of Jordan, and the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. I could see a direct connection between these two passages. They both pretty much tell us the same thing. So if we cut right to it, what do they say? They say, do what God tells you to do, and he'll give you everything that you need. We see this in the life of Elijah, where God provided food. And in the Worry program, I referred to that as heavenly hamburgers. God brought him bread and meat twice a day. Heavenly hamburgers. Because he did what God had instructed him to do. And so I'm thinking, all right, how does this look in my life? We put the Worry program together. That meant that we had to make some new puppets. We had to record a new script. We had to make new scenery and so forth. And before long, we had that program together and we're out doing it. Felt like it had such a powerful message for people. Trust God. Do what he wants you to do and you don't have to worry. It seemed to me like there was a whole lot of people worrying at that time. I don't know if that's because they really didn't trust God or what, but the message was for me. I need to trust God. I need to get serious about doing what God's called us to do, not worry about how we're going to be fed or clothed or anything else. I just need to get serious about getting the job done. Well, if you've listened to a previous podcast, you know that kind of how that story went when we left Alaska. We loved Alaska. We loved the people there. We loved the climate. Even the winters really weren't all that bad. But we knew that in order to do what God had called us to do, to be full-time in a puppet ministry, we were going to have to leave. And so by the middle of January of 1978, we're back in Michigan. Shortly after that, we're working on a new puppet stage. Once we got that stage finished, it's like, okay, the last real program that we were doing there in Alaska, kind of our go-to program, was the Worry program. It still had a good message. People in Michigan were worrying. And so with this new puppet stage, the first program that we did was the Worry program. Okay, with the new puppet stage, we were able to do far greater things than what we had been able to do with our smaller stage. And so things like the slides and so forth, we had 3 slide projectors backstage. So that meant we could do more with that. The stage was bigger. We made new puppets for that program and new scenery. I mean, totally revamped the Worry program, but it was still basically the same program. And we started doing that. Okay, we got the new stage and people are hearing about it. And so we're going from church to church. And that was, again, it was our go-to program. But I'll be perfectly honest, we found ourselves doing a lot with kids. And I really didn't feel like that program was age appropriate for kids. Most kids really aren't worrying. I mean, what do they have to worry about? Mom and dad typically taking care of everything they need, and so kids aren't worrying. And so as time went on, we knew that we had to develop other programs, and we were serious about doing that, and we're cranking them out fairly fast. So I guess what I'm saying is it wasn't too long before the worry program kind of got put on the back burner. We had so many other programs to do with other themes that the worry program just kind of phased out over time. It was still had a good message, but we had so many other programs that had good messages that we really didn't go back to that one much. Well, here we are. Now this is year 2025. I'm in a men's Bible study group, and we're doing, I think it's a 10-week study of the Sermon on the Mount. And part of the challenge is for 10 weeks to read those 3 chapters every day. And so I have been reading over and over again the Sermon on the Mount. And we're into, I don't know if this is week 2 or week 3 now of that study. So we still got a ways to go. But last week, when I got to chapter 6 and I read those verses, my mind immediately went back to sitting in that upper room at my desk when God used those verses to speak to me. So here we are, 49 years later. 49 years since we put the worry program together. We have tried the best of our ability to put the ministry first, maybe sometimes too far in first place, but we've tried to do that faithfully to the best of our ability. And so here I am 49 years later, and all I can tell you is God has done exactly for us like he has done for Elijah, like he told us to do in the Sermon on the Mount. Seek first the kingdom of God. And all these things were added. Man, I look around at all the worldly things that we have now. And I mean, it is amazing. I don't know how it's happened. It's been one raven after another. God providing food, God providing clothing, God providing shelter. Sometimes it's been, a check that comes in the mail. Sometimes it's been a bag of groceries sitting on our front steps. It's been one thing after another for 49 years. God faithfully providing. I've done my best trying not to worry about it. And I've told people kind of in jest over the years that the ministry is a faith ministry. We run on faith and a whole lot of fear. And there's some truth to that. Not knowing, how is God going to provide? Where is the next meal going to come from? How are we going to provide for our kids? It can be concerning, but yet we've stuck to it. And like I said, 49 years later, all I can say is God has kept his promise, and he has provided for us everything that we've needed and a whole lot more. Well, anyway, so for those of you watching or listening, I don't know where you're at. For us, seeking first the kingdom of God, God was calling us into a full-time puppet ministry. And obviously, that's not God's will for everybody. But whatever it is that God is speaking to you about, could I encourage you to trust him? Don't worry. Do what he wants you to do, and you'll be glad you did.
Yeah, I love that. I love that reminder, Dad, and thank you for sharing that. And it is pretty marvelous to look back on just how God has provided for you and the family in ministry for, well, even before Alaska and stretching through all of those years, even to now. And as you were sharing that, it was also just a reminder that to me, anyways, because I know where you're at now. I mean, I've witnessed the majority of that journey, and uh, for you to be able to be in that space to write a a program about worry in a situation where that would personally be keeping me up at night. Like it's just like I would be a worrying mess living in Alaska in a wooden tent without electric or water or sewer, all of that. Like that would have me an absolute mess. But then for God to kind of like just reach into that moment with you and then to strengthen your own faith in putting that together, but also strengthen the faiths of so many other believers along so many years with that program. And I remember that program as a kid. I remember, that was one that would pull into rotation, and it was kind of like one of those things where it sticks out in my mind because it was different. By the time I was, back behind stage, the worry program had been, I wouldn't call it sideline, but it wasn't what you led with. And
Yeah.
so when he got pulled in the rotation, it was always kind of a fun thing for me, anyways, to participate in, and a blessing to countless others for sure. So yeah, what a great reminder. Thank you for that.
Well, if we're talking about birds bringing food for Elijah and so forth, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard that birds really make bad cooks
Hmm.
because everything they make is foul.
No. Yeah.
But if you wanted to organize a party, you know, to celebrate the birds, it's real easy. You just wing it.
That's my kind of party right there, just winging it.
By the way, I found out why birds fly south for the winter. It's too far to walk.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I
All
think
right.
this podcast is going to the birds.
It's going to the birds. Yeah. Well, let's park it here and then we'll pick it up next week.